Helen, I think we are already live, but we can give it like another 1 minute so everyone will join and then we start.
Do you have to allow people in, or how does it work?
No, it's a live streaming. So,
okay.
Yeah. So we are already live, but we just give it another 1 minute. So, and we start. All right. Okay. So, hello everyone, and welcome to another session of Women Leading in MSF. Today's sessions will be in English. Yesterday we hosted Dr. Nagam from Amman Hospital, and the session was in Arabic. And today we have another special guest joining us from India. I have here my colleague Helen O'Neill. Hello, Helen.
Hi, Rasha.
Yeah. And Helen is the strategic advisor of MSF South Asia. She's joining us today from India, and I think we have a lot to discuss today related to her background and her role in MSF. So, Helen, I have a very long biography about you, but we would like to hear more about your background from you. So, who is Helen?
So my name is Helen O'Neill, and last century, in 1996, I joined MSF for 6 months, and I'm still here, basically. It wasn't the plan, but that's what happened. And I started as a medical officer in Bosnia. I'm a nurse by background. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, and when I arrived in Split, I remember, Europe still, I was given a helmet and a flak jacket, like the foreign correspondents you see on television have, with my name and the MSF name on it, which I thought was a bit much, because the war was already over by about 4 months anyway. And I ended up staying a year, not 6 months, because we were going to move out, and I wanted to be there for the closure because I'd made a lot of friends among the staff, and we did that. So I was a bit hooked by then, I have to say. So then I went to Sierra Leone as a nurse, and that's the only time I really was a nurse in MSF, to be honest. And then after that, I went to Afghanistan as a medical coordinator, and after that, I was working in the office in Amsterdam for a while, in MSF Amsterdam, and then I went off and did a master's, and then after that I was I was the SGBV person, the first one in MSF Holland or MSF OCA, because we hadn't really been paying attention to this topic, and I didn't really want to pay attention to this topic, but I ended up being the first person to start doing workshops, and they were in Burundi, Congo, and in Sierra Leone again. And after that, I came back and was working in Amsterdam in operations for about 8 years. And then I decided to go back to the field. So I went to Iraq as a head of mission. In between, there was a project coordination in Pakistan as well. And also had a mission in India for a couple of months. And I worked in the Toronto office for a while as well, setting up operations there in Canada. And then after that, I was, after I spent 2 years in Iraq, both Iraq and Jordan, based in both places, moving in and out. I went back to Amsterdam and was asked to go to Berlin to help out operations there. And I ended up working in Berlin for a couple of years as well. And then in 2019, I came here to Delhi to work in MSF India. And first of all, I was replacing the director of communications. So I've had many different hats. None of it makes sense, but it does make sense eventually. And then after that, I was asked to come back as a strategic advisor to the management team, which is the job I'm still doing now. Yeah.
That's
it in a nutshell. 26 years.
Actually, it's very interesting. And the 26 years working in humanitarian sector actually with MSF, over 26 years. So how can you describe the transformation within the organization and toward your role as a woman, leading so many different positions from field to communication to now strategic role? How do you see the transformation within MSF?
Many things have changed. There's always, unfortunately, that's why MSF is needed. There's always chaos or disasters or war in various parts. And you think it's going to be a quiet time, and then it's not anymore because something else happens. So it just changes location, but the same stuff happens to people all over the world. In an ideal world, of course, we would be all unemployed, which would be great, but that's not the way the world works. So over the years, it has become, MSF grew organically from some doctors and journalists who were protesting in Nigeria and Biafra. I think people know that from 1971. We passed our 50th birthday last year. And it was a frustration with the way things were working in the aid world generally. And so this was Sans Frontières, the first Sans Frontières. Now there's everything Sans Frontières, but we were the first ones, I believe. And things have changed a lot. I think security-wise, like it is very difficult for journalists now in the world, it's also difficult for MSF in the world. We used to be more protected or respected, I'm not sure which. In the past, if there were guys with guns, which there are in many places where we work, they would always leave us alone or tell others to leave us alone because we were looking after their families and their relatives, or maybe we delivered their wives' babies, etc. So there was always some sort of protection there, but I think that's disappearing now, and that's very sad. So we have to take a lot more care security-wise, and we're not as safe or protected as we used to be. That's one thing. I think it's an enormous organization now. It's grown so huge, and there's MSF offices almost everywhere. Well, not almost everywhere, but in most places in the world. And it's a big organization that is driven by people who have an awful lot of desire to be humane and be humanitarian and act as humanitarians, and they like to discuss and argue a lot. That hasn't changed, but a lot more. We're putting a lot more organization into things, and things have to become more streamlined because we're too big now to behave like we did last century. Let's put it that way. But we were big enough then as well. The people around us have changed as well. Some of the other NGOs that we used to rely on for help in certain situations when things were pretty disastrous, they're not working like that anymore. Some of them, they're policy making now or whatever, and they're not doing. We used to rely on one organization for water and sanitation. Now we have to do it ourselves. So that means a lot of extra people and equipment, training, and then implementation. So an awful lot has changed over the last 26 years for me, and certainly over the last 50 years for MSF. But it's still fundamentally the same organization, and we're still evolving all the time. And I like that about MSF, that there is this desire to change, although people are resistant to change, like in everything. But there is a desire to make things better and to work better, basically, yeah, I would say. It's changing, but not in a very dramatic way or anything like that. A lot of people say there's too much bureaucracy now. And systems have to be put in place and are in place now compared to what we had before. We had no smartphones when I started. We were using radios, which were actually very simple and easy to use. And faxes to send to headquarters and receive from headquarters. That's how it was. So different times.
No, it looks like a history.
I know.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So coming back to your current role with MSF South Asia, strategic advisors, what does it really mean? And especially during the time of COVID-19.
It's basically to try and accompany the management team who are here on the journey to sectionhood. This is the youngest office in MSF, basically, which is going to become a section of the upcoming International General Assembly. So we're I'm helping to build a strategic direction, if you like, and I'm also responsible for sparring on a lot of the medical issues that we've been involved in. During COVID, for example, which we went through here as well, of course, and some very bad times, some not so bad. We started a helpline, a mental health helpline. People were very frightened and scared. I remember in a couple of months from last year, late spring, early summer. We also did a small intervention in Manipur of high dependency unit. So we occupied a school, basically, which was unoccupied because the children were not allowed to go to school because of COVID. And we kitted it out for patients. We ran that for about 3 months. We did some training in Assam as well. That kind of thing is basically what we had to do during the COVID times because there was help was needed by mostly the Indian government can take care of everything. It's very, very huge here, as you know, and the scale is enormous. But the Ministry of Health is pretty much on top of things. Yeah.
And I understand that during COVID-19, you also engage or involved in specific activities related to the mental health, mental well-being for people during COVID-19. So I mean, it's not an easy strategic orientations. It could need lots of like mapping and gathering data and then building the strategy of helping the population. So how do you find yourself doing that as a woman in MSF? In sense like you got the support from MSF team. Do you think there are still challenges in MSF when it comes to empowering women working in strategic and leading positions? How do you see this? Working as a woman in this?
Yeah, I never found being female a barrier. Okay, when I worked in Afghanistan, I had to deal with the Taliban, and that can be difficult. That can be a challenge because you have to negotiate with somebody from the Taliban who doesn't want to talk to a woman. So I remember furiously writing notes for the logistic coordinator who was there with me, and he was asking my questions for me. He was a big 6'7" Dutch guy. So, but my voice shouldn't be heard. I was told by the interpreter as a lady, and my face was uncovered, but I had a scarf on, but my face was uncovered, and we had to ask permission. Could I come in for that reason as well? But it all worked out. And I also think, I remember one particular example, which I had nothing to do with. It just happened while I was there. But in Congo, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Shabunda, which is in South Kivu, we were running a very isolated project, which we had to fly in and out of. And we had a vacancy for a guard, and there was only 3 applications. And 2 of them were women applying to be a guard, and one of them was chosen. She was definitely the best candidate. And she was actually a nursing mother as well. So her older children would bring the baby to her a couple of times a day for a feed. And she actually was an excellent guard because basically she was passing messages because we don't have armed security or anything like that. All she has to do is be on her toes and make sure that the information gets to the people who need it. And I thought that was great. And those 2 women applied of their own volition. It wasn't that they were discouraged or encouraged, they just applied. So I don't think it's much of a barrier, honestly, being female. I think probably in the years I've been working here, my bosses, probably 40% of the time have been female. Currently, my boss is a lady as well. But in other jobs, it's not considered I don't consider it, I should speak for myself, I don't consider it a handicap to be a woman at the moment. Or during my career in MSF. I don't think I was ever blocked for anything because of being female.
That's a very interesting view. So it's interesting to hear more about your experience in the field, to be honest. So can you tell us more about the moment when you work as a nurse in different contexts? I think you came to the Middle East and you stay in Iraq for a while. So what else you can tell us about your experience in the field?
In Iraq, you'd like to know?
Yeah, I would love to hear about your experience in the Middle East as well. Yeah.
Okay. When I was in Iraq, we were actually in a very tight security situation because it was just when the war in Syria was beginning as well. So 2011 to 2013. And when we moved around in Iraq, we moved around very carefully. As foreigners were not popular, as you can imagine, because of the war that just had been rained down on the whole place. And I had actually worked in Iraq before I started with MSF. I worked in Iraq as a nurse in a hospital, and there was an actual war on then. And when I was there with MSF, there wasn't a war on, but it felt much more insecure the second time than it did when there was an actual war. Surprisingly, I think all of what we do and all the people that we work with they're people. People are pretty similar the world over. There's definitely, of course, many differences with culture and religion, etc. But people they all want the same thing. They want their kids to be able to go to school. They need enough food to eat, and they want peace. They don't want to be running from insecurity or war. That's not different in any place that I've been, to be frank. So I think that it's very, people are the same the world over, just about. I find that's my experience now, anyway. And there's people you like and people you don't like, and people you can work with, people you can't work with. That happens. I think it's very normal. Yeah.
That's very interesting. So I will take you again to, 26 years in humanitarian sectors. Surely you have some moments here that you will never forget. And maybe there are some challenge also you think it still exists in the humanitarian sector in general. So if you are going to summarize this experience, that's over 20 years, in terms of the opportunity and the challenges, in your view, for women working in the humanitarian field, what would be your view?
Probably one of the things I did not enjoy doing, but then I learned an awful lot from it, was the sexual and gender-based violence workshops. I didn't want to do it. I said no many times, and I kept being asked again and again to do it.
Why?
Because I had no interest. I thought it was a very dark subject. I don't know anything about it, but actually I ended up learning an awful lot about it. And I started, I think, in Sierra Leone, and I had to make it up as I went along because it was the first time for us to do this. And I asked each of the project coordinators in the projects to invite important people in their community, and by that I mean the hospital staff was clear, but I needed them to invite the priests, the imams, if there was an army base there, the commander of that base, police should come as well, and headmen from villages, traditional healers, anybody who had some power or influence, because you were hoping that whatever we shared with these people or they learned during this 2-day workshop, they would talk about and share with their people. And there was one man I remember in the first one we did, actually, and he was, I think he was 71 or 72, and he had, I think, 5 wives, and he had 35 grandchildren or something like that, an enormous family anyway. And he spoke with a very British accent because he was old enough to have been there when the British people were there, so when it was a colony. and he had been a policeman then as well. And we were talking about domestic violence, which is a big issue in many places, and there were policemen in the group as well, and they said we can't do anything about that. That's between them and it's their own private affair. And then this elderly gentleman stood up and he said, you can get them for disturbing the peace because you can't have a night's sleep because the woman is screaming, sort of thing. And they were saying, oh, well, maybe we could try that, because they didn't want to interfere. And at the end, he said as well that he was ashamed of himself because he had not sent any of his girl children or his female grandchildren to school. And he realized that that was a mistake after the 2 days when people were giving feedback. And I thought that was, and he was very influential. He was a village elder. And I thought, great, something, yeah, we've done something here. We've managed to do something here, which was excellent. Also telling people even in their own countries, because you have to prepare beforehand, what are the laws about rape in these countries? And it's illegal in all of these countries, but people don't know that because nobody ever gets arrested, or hardly anybody. It's not considered a crime as it is a crime, of course. So those kind of things. But I found all of that very difficult. And like I said, I think I learned more nearly than they did from listening to them. It really was a workshop. People worked and exchanged ideas, and they hadn't been in a situation where they were all talking to each other about such a sensitive topic, let's say. So that was very interesting. In Afghanistan, I always was fascinated by the fact that you might have 7 ladies sitting in burqas in an outpatient clinic that we would be running, and the children knew which one was their mum. And I could never figure that out, if it was because of their shoes or because of their smell. You know, 2 or 3-year-olds would go to the right lady in a burqa. They wouldn't mess it up, basically. And I used to watch that, and I used to think, I still don't know how this works, but it works somehow. Yeah, you're learning all the time, and also people. I'm very curious about people, nosy even, and that is one of the pleasures of MSF. You meet so many different people. I'm talking about dignitaries, right down to I don't know, your colleagues and patients. And yeah, there's many sad stories, but there's also many happy and funny stories as well. But there are many sad stories, and then you hope that, yeah, that won't happen the next time, because somehow that's the good thing about MSF as well. There is some autonomy. I'd be killed for saying this, but there is, that you can say, okay, I've noticed this a couple of times and it's not acceptable. So what can we do about it as MSF? And then you can come up with a plan. I remember chasing after a car in Freetown when I was a nurse there, because I was told that a 4-year-old had been brought in who had very severe malaria and needed a blood transfusion, and the parents had brought him to the hospital. And I chased the car to the hospital, in another car, in an MSF car. And when we arrived, he had died. And they needed $3. They didn't have $3 for that blood transfusion. And then you think, okay, how can we do something about this? This is not okay. They lost a little boy. So that's what I mean, this very sad stuff. And then in the evenings, when you're sitting with your teams or whatever, or when you're talking to your family or friends, you don't share with your family and friends as much as you do with teams, because many people, when you arrive back from somewhere, they will ask you 1 or 2 questions, and then tensions span over. They're not really that keen to hear all the gory stories that you have, whereas the other MSF people are, because they have their own stories they want to share. So it's an exchange.
Interesting, very interesting. So Helen, you speak a lot about culture integration, especially when you are in the field, you are new to new culture and traditions and new country. to your background, do you think this culture integrations come spontaneous, or there are much to be done through MSF to enable this integration for people going to the field to new countries? Did you, I mean, in another word, did you get this integration in the new countries spontaneous, that you live there, you get to know the traditions and culture, or you think MSF should put a lot of effort to do these integrations before sending staff, especially international staff, to the field?
Okay, this is my personal opinion.
Yes.
There's some things I don't want to eat, so then I will say that I'm a vegetarian. I'm not. But if somebody offers me something that I really don't want to eat, I don't want to insult them, so I blame it on vegetarianism, which I'm not, basically. There's, some things that are considered fine in other countries are not considered so good in my culture or whatever. But if, again, the curiosity, if you ask questions, you find out why it is this way, and this is what they like to do. And if you explain some things about you, they find it hilarious, because they don't understand why you would do the things that you do. So I don't think integration is why we're there, because we're clearly not from that country. So it's not our job to try and, I don't think they would appreciate that much as well. People, they want you to be respectful of their customs and traditions, which of course you should be. But you trying to become a Congolese or a Burundian or a Sierra Leonean, it's you never really make it, I don't think. So you shouldn't even try to. I mean, I have friends from most of the places that I've been working in, and they would say the same thing. Like, don't try to. You can't live our existence or feel our existence, because it's ours basically, and you have yours. It is two different things. So all you can do is be a respectful visitor and be interested in what they do, which I am anyway, and why they do what they do. But you don't. I don't think you should try to integrate or assimilate into a culture. I think you just have to show respect for that culture. That's my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. Also, it's an interesting point. So now we can take it to a social aspect about your day. Yeah, like if you can describe how you spend your day between work and, of course, family commitment, and keep the relations with your family. So how you spend your day between work and family, and
my day here in Delhi, or my day? Here. Okay.
Currently.
Currently. I get up quite early at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I get to work by about 8:30. So I'm a slow riser, let's put it that way. Then I have a certain amount of the day is structured, especially with meetings. A lot of meetings. MSF is a lot of meetings, if anybody wants to know. We are also called meetings sometimes here by some people. And apart from that, there's a lot of what you would call in America water cooler conversations, but coffee machine or over lunch, where which COVID, by the way, spoiled an awful lot of this, because of distance being kept and a lot of people working from home, so you don't see them for quite a while except on a screen. So that changed a lot of things, and I finish my day usually around 5:30. That's here in Delhi. It's busy. It's busy from, and in between, of course, you're checking your phone, sometimes you have to write some things, but I have my fingers in so many pies that I'm busy all the time, actually. Yeah.
And how you balance between your personal life and your work commitment? How do you do this balance?
Here in Delhi again?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't do very much. I'm already in bed by 8 o'clock, probably because of the air conditioning. Right now it's in the 40s in Delhi, and I'm not made for that. I'm Irish, so I suit much more. 16, 17 would be plenty for me, thank you. So I'm in bed, but probably listening to the radio or watching something on Netflix or something like that. But I sleep quite early. I sleep a lot here, to be frank.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, this is good to know about you because you are super active. I never imagined that you sleep a lot. I thought the opposite.
Yeah, it is. It's busy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So now we have a lot of people watching us now, and I think some of them want to be humanitarians. So what would be your advice for people who want to take humanitarian field as a career? What could be your advice?
Okay. MSF is an enormous brand now, as everybody is probably aware, and it's referred to in television programs and films and stuff like that. Oh, he's gone off to work with Doctors Without Borders. But it's not easy to get into MSF, I would say. Once you're in, you can move around, and that's obviously I did. I've had so many different hats in this organization. But in order to get in, you should have a background that is needed by MSF. All the websites will tell you, MSF websites will tell you what it is needed. And of course, we work mainly in medical, but also humanitarian settings. So everybody knows about doctors and nurses to a certain extent, but we also have, and there's many other paramedic roles that we have. But we also have a huge amount of support for those doctors and nurses and paramedics. And that comes in the form of logistics, finance, human resources, flight coordinators. We have flight coordinators, imagine that, because we need to use planes to get from A to B, and somebody needs to organize that. I'm talking inside a country, not international flights. And languages are very important as well. The main languages in MSF are English and French and Spanish, Arabic and Russian. Those 5, I would say. And it's very handy if you have one of those languages, or coming in as a unilingual doesn't help a lot. From the French perspective, I think it cuts out 9 countries that you can go to if you don't speak French. So that's something to consider. Then you need, rather than having 3 masters or something like that, it's much more appreciated by MSF if you have a basic degree, but you have life experience, or you've worked with another NGO, that you know what it's like to be out in difficult conditions sometimes. I mean, we're very well looked after where we live. We usually have nice housing, and we have, sometimes it's a tukul, but it can also be nice housing with somebody who will do your laundry and even cook your food so that you're free to do the work that you were hired to do. Which shocked me at the beginning. I thought this is very luxurious. But anyway, I was in Bosnia, so we had a human dishwasher and an electric dishwasher. I couldn't believe it. And our warehouse manager was actually a nuclear scientist. Our cook was an architect, but that's what war does, you know. Your life is turned upside down. So an attitude of being able and willing to go places that might not be like, it's not that you can say, I'd really like to go to the Philippines or something like that. That might be the case, but most likely not where you're going to be going. You might be sent to, I don't know, Ethiopia or South Sudan or South America, depending on your languages. Your languages also dictate where you would be sent. You do have to apply with a letter of motivation, which is not what a lot of people ask for in other organizations. And that's important, that you are very frank about why you want to do this, because that interests us a lot as MSF. What makes you want to work for MSF? That's very important for us to know as well. And it's difficult to get in, like I said, but it's really worth it once you're in. And then once you're in, you need to be flexible. You need to be adaptable. We hear those words all the time, and we mostly are, because you might have to do a complete 360 degrees and change tack because things have changed. But that's how it is. There's very little that's routine. I haven't been bored for 26 years. That's something that a lot of people cannot say. I don't like being bored, so I have a low boredom threshold. And I have not been bored for the last 26 years. Because it's always different, it's always changing. You meet new people, you meet great people. Yeah.
Well, you still find it rewarding work to do. I mean,
Sorry?
26 years, and you want to continue working in the same career, if we can call it. Do you think it's
I don't have any
rewarding?
plans not to work for MSF. Let me put it that way. And I have not in the last. The only thing I did, which was not MSF, I spent a year doing a master's, and that's after I came back from that. That's when they kept saying SGBV, and I kept saying no, and they kept saying, SGBV, you're the right person for it. Anyway, yeah. So I took a year out to do a master's, but apart from that, no. I've just continued, basically. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's very exciting and interesting as well as boring sometimes. Teams that are bored are the ones that are in the field where they're waiting for an MOU to be signed by the government and they can't do any action yet. Or there's a security situation and you're in lockdown. Then you have to be nice to each other because you're not going to move anywhere fast and you can't get away from your colleagues.
Interesting, an important point, exactly.
Yeah.
So we have around 3 minutes left for this session, Helen, and that thank you very much, because you are very spontaneous and honest, sharing your perspective about field and about your work currently, what you like and what you think it's a challenging for you because you don't like to do it. So we have 3 minutes, and I would like to leave it for you to do a closing message, maybe addressing women working in MSF or women who want to be an MSF.
Sorry, you're asking about women working in MSF?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we have women working in the same jobs as men in MSF. There isn't that much difference, except, for example, in let's say obstetrics and gynecology. Then we need women to do those jobs because in many cultures it's not acceptable to have men doing those jobs. So female obstetrician gynecologists are very important. But the flight coordinators I know are female. There's no gender attached to many of these roles or positions. And sometimes it's better to have a man in a certain position depending on the society that you're in and who they have to deal with, or it's better to have a female. So that would be country specific or according to who you're working with. But otherwise, there is no gender attached, I don't think.
Interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. Helen, thank you so much for your time today. And I think it's one of the sessions that you just spontaneous and you reflect your view very honestly. So thank you so much for accepting to be our guest today. And actually, we have this series as an ongoing public communication to dedicate a space for women in MSF, speaking about the role, the challenges, and the opportunities they view inside the organization. So we keep organizing more sessions in the futures to host more MSF teams. And would like to thank you today for your time and everything you shared with us.
Thank you very much. I wish you all the best with your futures, wherever they're going to be, whatever they're going to be.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone. And we please follow our pages for the new sessions related to women leading in MSF. Thank you and bye-bye. Goodbye. Thank you.